Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Your host is Deborah Rue, CEO of Rue Global Impact and co-founder and chairwoman of Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring billions of voices of persons with disabilities together. To join the global community and to donate to the cause, visit billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org. And now, on to the episode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Deborah Rue, and I'm the CEO of Rue Global Impact and also the executive officer for Billion Strong. I want to tell you today, I want to give a visual. I try so hard to remember to do a visual description, but there's one reason why I'm going to do it today for sure. So I am a older white woman with gray and purple hair, and I have on black and bluish green because today we're recording it at St. Patrick's Day. Woohoo! And Aiden's from Ireland. So we're going to talk more about that. But I also am wearing these beautiful earrings. And the reason why I'm telling you about these beautiful earrings is because I'm very proud to have been selected as one of the LinkedIn creators to Accelerate. And they really encourage us to get to know the other ones. And I met Tracy Renee Hubbard, who is a brand new African-American entrepreneur, very talented, and her brand is Bonnet Scotch ! And these are her lovely earrings. And so I wanted to support her as a woman supporting another woman, since it's also Women's History Month in February. Plus, they're cute. Aiden, aren't they cute? I can see you wearing them. So Aiden's, don't go there, Deborah. So anyway, Aidan Healy is joining us today, and I love his work. And we had such a good time misbehaving before we got on air, so now I'm going to have to behave. And he is the chief executive officer at Lexxic, and I'm going to let him tell you what they're doing, but he, like me, he understands neurodiversity as I do, as someone who's ADHD, and I'm almost sure dyslexic too. But Aiden, welcome to the program. Do you mind telling the audience a visual description and then telling them who you are?
Yes, thank you so much, Deborah, for the invitation. It's lovely to be here. And I have walked myself in from the St. Patrick's Day parade and drinking Guinness to film this, especially
Where's the green beer?
To reassure your audience, I am fully sober and doing my cultural heritage a disservice. It's lovely to be here. I'm wearing a blue top, not a green one, unfortunately. I'm a white male, mid-30s. Age is catching up with me. I'm not going to lie. I got some wrinkles. I'm losing quite a bit of my hair. I've still got my blue eyes, though. So I'm feeling good about my blue eyes. And just really excited to be here to share more about me and a little bit about Lexxic, my personal passion and my lived experience, if you want to call it that, comes from two very important women in my life. My own mother, who has a disability and who I suppose really grew up learning about disability and how my mom was different and how the world saw my mom for as soon as I could start to walk and start to think. And my own wife, who has dyslexia as well, who I suppose very much brings the personal passion for this space. Professionally, I'm a psychologist by background. I've done all kinds of different things, but I guess what I'm really excited about is my role as CEO of Lexxic. Lexxic is an organization that specializes in neurodiversity. We're based here in the UK and Ireland. We have a team of 70 people. We work right across FTSE 100, public sector, workplace, education. And I guess our passion is really, how do we help individuals to thrive and be at their best? And also, how do we create environments that really are neuro-inclusive and help people feel like they belong and help people feel like their differences can be celebrated and can be a good thing?
So is that true? Could we actually celebrate our lived experiences with disabilities? Could we really? Could your mother? Could your wife? Could I, as an individual with ADHD? Yeah. Can we really do it? Or are we all broken? Right. So I know that you and I say, no, these are about our lived experiences. And Aiden, I know that right now you're in London, but you are based in Dublin, but that you also, your company is a global, so you support people globally, and you
Yes.
also, as our Root Global Impact, you are part of the Valuable 500. You are one of
Yes.
the vendors, which I love, because I remember one time a friend of mine at Ernst & Young had made a comment to me. We were talking about inclusion, and I was saying we need to do a better job of including people that have the more severe disabilities. And she said, are you saying that it is easy to accommodate a person that has neurodiversity, Deborah? And I said, no, what I'm saying is that we haven't accommodated people with neurodiversity so they could be their most innovative, their most productive, really bring their best self to work. I think we've done a horrible job with that. But many of us, like me, are still in the workforce. And so could I have done more if my employers understood the uniqueness? I mean, not unique in a way, but what it brings to us, this neurodiversity, how thinking differently will allow us to solve problems differently. So I love what you're doing at Lexxic, because this is not about pity or, oh, help those poor. This is really about how do we all bring our best self to work? How do we make sure the employers know how to accommodate us, include us, value us? And it's also something that's not talked about. I also want to remind everybody, 80% of the community of people with disabilities, from where it's 1.2 to 1.7 billion, 80% of us have invisible disabilities, and we matter, we're part of it. So that's why I love the work you're doing. And I love that you have such a big team too. That's wonderful. So tell me, for example, some kind of the type of services that Lexxic offers, because I would imagine people would struggle with that. And so tell us.
Let me say where our journey generally begins, because most of us, when we hear the word neurodiversity, that's not a word we've grown up with.
Right.
What we've grown up with is maybe dyslexia, ADHD, autism, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, and so on. And we generally ask audiences, we say, how did you first hear about ADHD? What was your first experience or the first thing you heard? And it's in the name, right? Like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And we actually call ADHD the double barrel shame, because clearly whoever came up with it's like disorder just wasn't enough. Shame. Yeah. Let's put deficit as well. And right. So most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we've grown up hearing about these differences through a medical model, through a deficit model, through a model that really only focuses on what the person can't do or what their limitations are. And unsurprisingly, when you grow up with that model and you meet someone with ADHD, you may have an impression of this person, as you said, Deborah, the stigma is maybe this person is broken, maybe this person is ill, maybe this person isn't a high performer that I want in my organization. So we use the word neurodiversity because it takes a more balanced view of how people are. And so often our journey starts by going, ADHD is not a deficit and a disorder. ADHD is often two sides of the same coin, which is on one side of that coin, you might say, what might you say? You might say this person is impulsive, but actually in a different environment, that person is a quick decision maker. In one environment, you might say, God, this person is highly energetic, they can't sit still, and so on. In another environment, as you know, Deb, particularly the CEO environment, that is a huge strength, right? You're going, you're moving, you want to work all day. And so we use neurodiversity because it is about that diversity. And many neurological differences come with unique strengths. The challenge is we're really not looking or tapping into those strengths because we have an education environment, because we have a workplace environment that is often designed for one way of thinking. And if you're in the majority, you don't see what the problem is, right? This is the classic thing in D&I and exclusion. If you're in the majority, you walk in and you go, I don't see the problem here because the system is designed for you. It facilitates you. But for those who are not in that majority, the system is really quite exclusionary. And also, let's be honest with ourselves, how often have we walked past someone in a wheelchair on the street when we were growing up and our first reaction was, God, poor them. Right. When our reaction should be, actually they're only really disabled or feeling disabled if they're in an environment that doesn't facilitate them. And that's not to discount medical challenges or physical challenges or any other challenges that people do have. And neurodiversity is not just a superpower and all of these things. There are real challenges, but we have to ask ourselves as workplaces, as a society, what kind of environments we want to have. So that is a 5-minute tangent, and now I'll actually answer your question about what Lexxic does. Sorry.
But I will say, Aiden, though, you make some really, really powerful points, because we've been in this field a really long time, since 2000. And I know I have said to employers, you need to include all people with disabilities. This is ridiculous. But the realities, just being fair, there's a lot of there's so many major nuances. And so, yes, we want you including people that are blind. We want you to include people that are deaf. We want blah, blah. But at the same time, we all have to acknowledge, and once again, we meant you were one, Lexxic is one of the valuable 500, and so are we. So love Caroline Casey groups, because they've also recognized the reality is, I don't think any one consulting group can handle everything. I think it's better for us. And I know you and I have talked about that, because I know Lexxic is coming here to the United States and we need them. We need them in the United States. But we are really better together, coming together, because you're right, the nuances associated with. And Aiden, I did not get diagnosed until I was in my late 50s, my mid 50s, that I had ADHD. And then many of my friends, including Neil Milliken, said, well, how could you not have known, Deborah? But I don't know. But once they did, it made a lot more sense. I remember my teacher.
Well, let me ask you a different, which is, how were you meant to have known? Where do we get educated and informed about ADHD? In school, in college? And you're so right, Deborah, because so much of our community is not diagnosed. And when we talk to organizations, we say this, we say, you can't, when it comes to something like gender or something like race, look, the majority of the time, if you stand in front of me, your gender, your race, I can probably tell it by looking at you. But having a neurological difference, you may not know, the organization may not know. So it's not just about where are the dyslexics and how do we help them? The question is, how do we process reading and writing and information, and what kind of workplace do we create? And just by the way, in that, do you know any senior leader who says, I think I have too much information. I think I have too many emails. I have more stuff that I can possibly read. It takes me too long to write all of this stuff. This is about a more challenging workplace conversation that says, actually, why does it have to be an email? Why can't it be a voice memo? Why does it have to be 8 pages Arial 12? Why can't it be a mind map? Why is it embarrassing to use text-to-speech software? Why do I have to be sitting at my desk on Zoom 8 hours a day looking at the camera, and that means I'm paying attention? Why can't I stand? Who the hell is able to do that? No one. You don't have to have ADHD. The work environment we're creating is not just challenging for people with neurological differences, it's actually challenging for everyone. And if we were to really think about this from not a condition perspective, but from a barriers to participation perspective,
and
I think we'd have very different.
And innovation and creative
talent and engagement, and again, getting the best out of people. And when it comes to the workplace, we are not getting the best out of a very significant portion of our population. And that is a business challenge. And as you've said, with the valuable 500, that is business value. That is your organizational objectives. That is pound notes or dollar bills. That is important to all businesses.
And I love the direction we're going. This was not the direction I thought we were going to go, but I think it's such an important direction, because now just looking at the 500 corporations, that the CEOs that really stood up and said, no, we're going to lead. We're going to, and these 500 corporations aren't the only ones. There's others that have done it as well, but we can't help but just really give kudos to the CEOs that stood up, the 500 CEOs, and said, no, we're going to do this. But I believe that to solve the problems it and reduce the gaps and make sure that everyone in the workforce benefits from what's happening. As you were just saying, I think that they can't just bring in people that are experts at bringing disability inclusion. I'm an expert at disability inclusion. What does that mean? It really, because there's so many variables, and sometimes
Yes.
our communities fight with each other. I know that's happened here in the
Sure.
States. There's some things that will be more accessible to one group of our disabilities will not be for the other, and they fight and we don't help each other. And so I think what's interesting about what Lexxic does is that they need to bring you in regardless of who else they're working with. They need to say they're working with the Rue Global Impact to help them with strategy and make sure everybody's included. But they need to bring your team in too, because neurodiversity is really being ignored. And if we're going to really rethink how this works during the great resignation where corporations are freaking out because the younger people don't want to work for them because we see them as, or I'm not one of those young people, you are, but where they're seen as bad, they're evil. Do no evil is what Google's thing. Do no evil. Don't steal our data in Facebook. So I think it's an opportunity. It's a real opportunity for employers to rethink it all, to really rethink it all. And I think that's why Lexxic is very important in these conversations. And I think, and I don't hear as much conversations with neurodiversity going on in the States as I do in the UK. I know we were talking earlier about Nancy Doyle's work with Genius Within and the work that Lexxic is doing, which is amazing, but we have 500 corporations that want to include people, Aiden. How do we possibly get our hands around when it's so important to do this right so that we're fully included?
Yeah, so you are right. Lexxic specializes in neurodiversity because we felt like sometimes when in pan-disability conversations, neurodiversity isn't always included. And that's our thing. Different people do different things. And look, obviously, people just don't have one difference. You can have dyslexia and have another disability. You can be Black, you can be lesbian, you can be a woman, you can have so many other things going on. So we naturally in our work think about a person-centered view, a holistic view. But as you're right, Deborah, people are complicated and people are passionate and we all want to do the right thing. But what's right for Lexxic may not be right for another organization. What's right for one individual may not be right for another. And of course, it's complicated to get millions of people or even 500 organizations all agreeing and going in the same direction. I think, though, what I would say is a few things to organizations on this, which is number one, you don't have to be an expert in every neurodiverse condition. And someone with ADHD is not necessarily expecting you to sit down and have a clinical and nuanced understanding of what ADHD is. What you should think about, though, is barriers and either removing those barriers or adjusting those barriers. And as I said to you earlier, Deborah, that's not necessarily a disability conversation or a neurodiversity conversation. It's a human conversation, which is to go back to, do you need to have dyslexia to not engage with a 45-page Arial 10, like triple column PDF that you can't edit, that you can't copy because your organization has put protections on it that doesn't go into text-to-speech, to not feel engaged? So the question for me is, how do we help people focus and be fully engaged at work? How do we help people read and write and communicate and access all of this information we have in our organization? How do we think about social communication and social engagement and social structures? These are human conversations, not clinical expertise conversations. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean you appoint John, who has autism, to lead the entire autism strategy, because you do need clinical expertise. You do need legal expertise. You can't expect your community or maybe even your HR team to know everything about everything. That's where organizations like Lexxic or many other partners can hopefully help. And because we've been on the journey with so many clients. We probably have seen your challenges before. We've probably worked with communities like yours before. We've probably understood some of the solutions that you're trying to come up with. And I think, look, that's the advantage of working with us. But again, what I would say is,
in the intersection,
listen to your community. And a lot of these are human problems. They're not clinical neurodiversity problems. And just what you said there about the great resignation and people not coming to the office. I think I read a study recently where something like 60% of people said they don't want to go back to the office. And I'm a CEO, we have an office, but what does that say about how bad the office was, right? What does that say about our expectations were? Like, I'm in London, it's get up, get on an underground tube and cram yourself in with everybody for an hour a day, both directions,
both ways,
into a big soulless skyscraper that is not human-centric designed. It's
no nature.
What does it say about the office? I mean, I was going to swear there. I'm not going to swear on the podcast, but what does it say about the office? Maybe we need to rethink the office. Maybe we need to rethink the workplace. Maybe we need to rethink how we do things here, folks.
Yes.
And it shouldn't take a global pandemic to drive that kind of change, or I certainly hope it won't in the future.
And yet it did, unfortunately.
Yes.
But what I'm curious, Aiden, because I know that a lot of corporations will come to us and they'll say, oh, okay, fine, we agree, we want to, where do we even begin? And the thing that I'm fascinated about what Lexxic does is that it almost in some ways seems like y'all would be a good place to start. Now, I always say, start with a roadmap, blah, 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 which, just giving credit, the Valuable 500, I know they're working on that, but there's also groups like Business Disability Forum, Disability In, World Institute on Disability. There's a lot of other groups too. But I often am asked, where do I begin? Especially when disability inclusion has so many different parts, including you're not really disability inclusive in my book if you are not focused on accessibility. If we can't have access, you don't care about us. And so we're making decisions, certainly, but at the same time, if I was a corporation, if I was an employer and I'm just starting, where do I begin? But before you say that, I want to say the other day I had somebody, this happens to me all the time. I had somebody approach me because they provide diversity and inclusion training. So I always have to stop and ask a question. And I'm like, great, you'll have all this diversity inclusion training. Do you include people with disabilities? Just curious. No. But I said, well, absolutely not. We will not be part of it. We will not promote you. We will not do anything. And she said, but we're going to. And I said, great. And if you need help, let us know. But if you are not including us, all right, now you take that, which is ridiculous, but unfortunately happening.
Sure.
And then let's say that we are included. Does that mean we just include blind people? Aiden, and you, of course, know that is not the case. But I think that's one thing I do think is interesting about Lexxic, because it seems to me like you could go in and teach them how to make sure all humans are included, and there's benefits to the rest of the disability groups, as well as, of course, neurodiversity and everybody else. But I'm putting words in your mouth. So.
Yeah. So look, I'd say a few things about this. First off, it is important when we talk about neurodiversity that people can have co-occurring differences. People can have intersectional differences. So you don't just have dyslexia or you just have ADHD. As you said, Deborah, you can have co-occurring differences. You can have 3 or 4 neurodifferences. You can have 1. And while you also have this is also the thing about DNI. It's not if you are dyslexic, you don't have an age, a race, a gender, a disability, a sexuality, and all of these things. So of course, an intersectional approach in organizations is important, but that's probably a different conversation. Where do you begin? I think it depends where you are in the organization. So let me give you a few examples. I think if you're at the C-suite, the leadership team, what we would generally say in our experience is your strategy is not working for one of 3 reasons. Number 1, you lack a compelling vision. So your neurodiversity strategy reads like, God, we probably have some people with ADHD and we better do something. And God, we might be breaking the law. Let's make sure we're helping the poor souls with ADHD and we're not breaking the law. That's not a compelling vision. Number two is you have a lack of coordination. So you have multiple departments in your organization. They're not joined up. For example, your adjustments, your training, your recruitment, and so on. And number three for me, I would say, is you have a lack of accountability, or you have accountability spread so thinly across so many different people, you essentially have no accountability. And we often get this. People sit down with us and go, God, why did that not work? And I said, because you had no clear vision of what you wanted, you had no coordination between your stakeholders, and you had no actual, this is what success looks like from a hard quantitative or even a qualitative view. So I would say those three things are important to get in line at the beginning of a journey at a C-suite leadership launch level. Look, I think if wherever you are in the organization, what we would always say is, look, let's just start small and build from there. If you're an individual, is there an employee resource group? Is there a community? If there's not, maybe you could help create one. Right. If you're in HR, maybe you could send out an email and say, hey, look, I'm in HR. I'm not pretending to be an expert in this, but I want to listen. And I want, if you want to come forward with your own story, if you're a parent, if you're a carer, if your cousin has a neurodifference and you are passionate about this for whatever reason, come forward. Why don't we host a panel? Why don't we host a webinar? Why don't we start somewhere from there and build? But I want to be really clear. Talking about it and raising awareness, and oh my God, Deborah, have we raised a lot of awareness, you and I'm sure, over the last couple of years. If only raising aware, you can be aware of something and you can still not do a whole lot about it.
I know it amazes you sometimes how true that is. I just want to make one more comment. In case any Americans heard the word adjustment, I want to remind you that in the States, we call it accommodations, but we're talking about the same thing. And I know you're a global, I just want to make sure if any Americans heard adjustments, they know we're talking about accommodations. So just wanted to say that one thing, but I just really appreciate the work that you are doing. And I know that so many employers are truly committed. They really do want to do the right thing. And I'm glad you mentioned employee resource groups. I love Kate Nash's group and what they're doing. Oh, they're amazing. And sometimes an employee resource group will actually get the employer in a lot of trouble if you don't do it right. You cannot be careless with this. Your employees will get all hopeful that you care about something that's important to them. And then you put no real effort. The executive leader you put in doesn't care about it, and people will quit on you. People will that will make your thing, that'll make it worse. So take the time to do things right.
It's if you treat people poorly collectively, and then you create a group where they all get to talk about their experiences together, they generally leave that group collectively mad and upset at you. Don't get me wrong, we work a lot with employee resource groups, and we have to have conversations to say, look, just because your leadership team is not using the terminology you want them to use, or they're doing things as quickly as you want them to do them, or that doesn't make them bad people. And the way of helping people to change their minds and behaviors, yes, accountability is important, but it doesn't mean we have to go on the warpath against the whole organization. So of course there's a balance there. I guess I would say, you know what, Deborah, I think for us, a lot of the healing conversations that happen, it is about listening and empathy. And again, as I go back to, if you're in the majority, you don't see the problem with the system because the system has probably been designed for you. And I say that as someone who is white, male, middle class. I have had all of the privilege living here in Ireland.
You've been in the top of the bell curve, and all of us and others on the side. Yeah.
So as part of my life, I've had to do a lot of listening and learning and unlearning to go, oh, I never realized that if you're not like me, or you don't look like me, or you are different to me, you don't have the same experience of this system that I do. You don't feel that way. And if you have dyslexia and you walk into an average organization and you open up the big top leadership team chart, you don't see a lot of people talking about their dyslexia. You don't see a lot of people.
Even though we know they're there, and we know 65% of entrepreneurs have dyslexia or ADHD. 65. And the reason why we don't work for you normally is because you don't accommodate us and you don't appreciate us. And so we go out and we create our own work. But Aiden, I want to make sure that I know that we're almost out of time. So I want to make sure that I'd like you to answer one more question, but I also want to make sure that you tell the audience how to contact Lexxic and where you are on social media and things like that, because I want to make sure, and once again, they are in the Ireland and the UK, but they are a global brand. They work with organizations all over, and they're coming into the States, and we're hoping to help them out because we want more resources, just like Dr. Caroline Casey wants more resources for the Valuable 500. Rue Global Impact does too. We all are stronger together. So Aiden, my question for you is, can you give us some examples of good policy and systemic, I'm not going to be able to say that word, which sometimes happens to me. So
systematic? Is that what you meant?
Yes, that word.
Sure.
I'm 60. I don't have to say that word anymore. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess we tend to divide our work into three key areas, which is first, we call it empowering the individual, which is your adjustments policy, your adjustments process. It doesn't matter if your line managers have awareness. It doesn't matter if the recruitment policy is great. If that person can't get access to adjustments or accommodations quickly, easily, and straightforwardly. And if you give a person a bad experience of that process, their engagement, their motivation, their brand loyalty, absolutely. Adjustments is say as number one, empowering the individual. The second thing we say is empowering culture, because adjustments remove barriers often in that individual's day-to-day life. They don't remove adjustments in the organization more widely. And when we talk to many individuals, say, the barrier is not that I don't have the equipment I need. The barrier is the attitude of my line manager. The barrier is the microaggressions from colleagues. The barrier is people don't know what to say and they're really uncomfortable. So education, training, awareness. Your line managers are the custodians of your organization's culture. And I say this as a CEO, right? I can come out and say, Lexxic is this and Lexxic is that. The majority of my team, their experience of Lexxic is dictated by the person they line manage, who line manages them, not me. And it's important to remember, line managers are the custodians of your policies and cultures, not HR. Most people don't see HR, but they see their boss regularly. And look, finally, on the systemic parts, we call it empowering the organization. I would think about things like your recruitment processes, your built environment processes, your communications, your accessibility on your web, your internal portals, your documents. There's no point saying we have an amazing adjustments process. We have really caring, loving line managers who are super supportive. Oh, but by the way, to actually get recruited into this organization, you have to go through a process that is so filters out. Oh, and you only have to go to this one type of building, which is open plan, bright lights and super noisy. Oh, and you have to use like this internal portal, which we haven't updated since, 1982. And that's the only way you can use it. That you're not going to get people to feel included. So what we say is empower the individual, empower your culture and the people around that individual, and empower the organization, systemic process change, environment, recruitment, etc.
Now, how can we find out more about Lexxic?
So there's a few ways. Our website is a good place to start. It's lexic.com. The reason we're called Lexxic, I can just tell you very briefly if I have time, Deborah, is our founder, Nicola, had dyslexia, and dys is, I think, the Latin or Greek for lack of, and lexia is Latin or Greek for language. So dyslexia literally means lack of language. She wanted to call the organization Lexia. Unfortunately, somebody beat her by about 30 years to that. Somebody beat her by about 3 or 4 years to Lexxic with 1 X. So we're Lexxic with 2 X's. Website is a good place to start. fill out the form and email us. We are on LinkedIn under Lexxic, Twitter under Lexxic Limited Ltd. And you can also look me up on LinkedIn I'm mainly LinkedIn. I'm too old for all of these other social media platforms now. So find me on LinkedIn, follow us. We post resources. We have free events. We have taught leadership pieces. We are constantly pumping out good stuff and spreading the good word. So
I agree.
I ended on a religious note there, spreading the good word. We are many have been healed by our content. So we preach that we preach neurodiversity.
I agree. Well said. And thank you to Aiden, and thank you to the audience, and thank you everyone for the outpouring of love that you gave me for my husband. That was a very sad thing for me and my family. So thank you, everyone. And Aiden, thank you so much for being on the show today. And special thanks to Doug Foresta, my amazing producer. And we will see everybody soon.
You've been listening to Human Potential at Work. To learn more about RU Global Impact, visit ruglobal.com. And to learn more about Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring the billions of voices of persons with disabilities together, you can join the global community and donate at billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org.